Paul and his dog Bosco are just world-renowned for their human remains detection.
It looks like we got about 15, you think, in here. So this may be the cemetery. To me, it looks like a hasty burial. And the fact that it's like a couple of feet from the house, who puts a body next to their house? So I think there's a good chance that 2 people were murdered here.
This is the abandoned mining town of Cerro Gordo. Back in the 1800s, Cerro Gordo was a silver boom town. The newspapers back then reported a murder a week. Back then, the headstones were made out of wood. And these headstones have been lost to age, they've been lost to weather, they've been lost to theft. Just over a month ago, I met Paul and Bosco. And Paul and his dog Bosco are just world-renowned for their human remains detection. You know, Paul has found hundreds of unmarked grave sites all over the world, including some very high-profile cases.
The biggest discovery was on the island of Tarawa, which is about 6,000 miles from here. And in 1942, the U.S. Marines invaded Tarawa, and it was a bloodbath. It's a little island, about 285 acres, it had 4,000 Japanese on it, and in 76 hours, 5,000 people died, with about 1,000 Marines. You know, unlike Guadalcanal, they went there, the Japanese were somewhere else, and then they had to come in. They were ready to fight, and they fight almost to the last man. I think there was 7 of the Japanese that were actually captured, but they were all wounded. So, you know, I mean, it was a heck of a battle. So I talked to Mark Noah. He's a president of History Flight that was the first guy to say, I'll try the dog. No one else would. Yeah. But he said, I'll try it. And he knew where stuff was and where stuff wasn't. And at the end of the day, he says 100%. And there's a lot of dead people there. So that was really cool. Long story, but it resulted in finding 47 U.S. Marines, including Lieutenant Bodyman, who was a Medal of Honor recipient. The one thing that I had looked at for training methods, I decided to go with how bomb dogs are trained. You use these square tubs, and each one has a hole in it with a ball in it. It has a remote control thing, a key fob. So when he finds it, the ball pops right in the face up in front of him. He'll grab it too. So it's a really good way, because the dog will not touch anything because he wants that ball. Then you start putting things where he has to go hide the darn thing, and then start working out away from where your training area is, and they pick it up really quick.
I think I remember last time you were here, you mentioned like there's instances where you'll hide bones within like a pet cemetery or something.
What we don't want is the dog to alert to false alert, right? So just north of Bishop, there's a ad hoc pet cemetery. So you don't want them, alerting on dead cats and dogs. So I thought that'd be a good training thing. So I'd get a little vial of soil that has decomp in it, from a location where someone died, or or there's a old grave or something. Just use that as a training aid. And so I would keep him in the car so he can't see anything. And I put him at the far end of the pet cemetery, so he had to go through all those hundreds of pets that are buried, and he goes over them like they're not even there, until he finds the one little vial with some soil in it that has decomp in it. He's never, ever not gotten it.
When we got introduced, I was most excited about better understanding the graveyards here, the grave methods, the burial methods, and just trying to determine and give peace to a lot of these people that died here. The fact is that not a single headstone here mentions who's below it. The vast majority, in fact, everybody here is seemingly lost to time. We don't really know who's buried here. We don't really know when they were buried. We don't really know where they were buried. And so with Paul, I was hoping to first determine the borders of a cemetery that I know that exists. And I was hoping to at least define the edges of that cemetery so we could give a proper place of rest for all the people that are buried there. Over the course of hours, Paul and Bosco and I were able to determine the rough borders of the cemetery, which is nice to be able to keep people out of there. We weren't able to determine individual grave sites in that part, but we were able to get the rough borders. Back here on the backside of Cerro Gordo, which used to be called Newtown, or this is Chinatown, where a lot of the Chinese workers worked, we found a few more people, including 2 people to either side of this cabin that I'm sitting at right now. This cabin is one of the first cabins that I stayed at here at Cerro Gordo. It was one of my first projects, was building this deck that I'm sitting on right now. I built that very shortly after coming here, And this I always referred to as kind of the writer's cabin. I saw it as a hideaway, a retreat from everything. But now, knowing that there are human remains on either side of this cabin brings a little bit different light to the whole experience in this cabin. It's still beautiful. It's still a stunning view of Death Valley from right here, but it's a bit creepy, to be honest with you. And last time Paul was here, Bosco immediately detected right over here, about 10 or 15 feet away, in this weird mound, as well as over here in front of what used to be an active mine. And that day we went further down, we found 3 more bodies, or 3 more burial sites. And shortly after, I found a newspaper article where a former foreman pointed up to an area and he said that's where the old Chinese cemetery is. So that was important. You know, that would mean that the Chinese workers here at Cerro Gordo were buried separately from the main cemetery. And this is something that has been rumored for a very long time. You know, and the only fact that we had to base this on was that it was done in other locations. You know, this is 1865, this is right after the Civil War. So it's a different world. But seeing this article seemed good enough reason to bring Paul and Bosco back up here. So that's what they did this month. So Paul and Bosco arrived and we did a little bit of looking around the hoist house.
Okay. So we're here up at the hoist building, and we know that some Chinese miners were trapped on a cave-in about 200 feet down. And so we're going to have Bosco go check by the winch and see if he gets an alert for any, you know, the compounds we look for in human decomposition. So I'm just going to run them along the edge here a little bit and see what happens.
There you go.
Yep, it's coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, good boy.
Bosco pointed out a couple of spots, but we were really interested in going was here, you know, to the cabin where there was remains to the right and to the left. And pretty much immediately, Bosco pointed to the exact same spots. Just over here to the right, there's a mound of dirt where Bosco picked up on human remains, and over here by the mine shaft, he picked up on human remains as well. And given the location, the proximity to the cabin, you know, something isn't sitting right about the burial sites by this cabin. You know, they're too close to the cabin. You wouldn't bury somebody right next to your cabin because it's going to smell. The method of which they're buried as well, just kind of pushing dirt over them, isn't a method that would have been done traditionally.
Okay, so we've been here last time and we got good alerts from Bosco on right about where that bush is, right, that pile of dirt is, and over there where it goes in the mine. To me, it looks like a hasty burial. And the fact that it's like a couple of feet from the house, who puts a body next to their house? So I think there's a good chance that 2 people were murdered here. You know, the bad guys came in, did that, killed them, and then, you know, took whatever they were. It'd be interesting, you know, how long this place has been here. I mean, I've seen a lot of graves.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything like this. I can't imagine, like, would you bury someone 3 feet away from your cabin? No. It stink pretty bad.
Yeah. Paul is believing that this was a murder, that somebody came in here, robbed this cabin, murdered these 2 guys, and hastily buried them here and there. That seems to be the only reason you would bury them so close to a cabin, and the only reason you would bury them in such a way that they're buried. That's interesting, you know, because Paul brought up that there are ways to determine who these people were.
So yeah, you would get that. You'd have to go to a lab, and that would be probably Intermountain Forensics. That seems to be the top one in the U.S. right now. Get the DNA, then upload that into GEDmatch. They'll figure it out. If it's Chinese, that could be. But there was a lot of Chinese people in California. I mean, the gold rush, Los Angeles, they put it in the train. So there could be some relatives out there. I mean, 75% of GEDmatch is European, you know, Caucasian. But the other ones, I think there'd be a good chance.
Yeah, that'd be nice to give like a memorial for whoever it was.
Yeah.
Be able to name them or something like that.
But I feel pretty good that those 2 guys, whoever those 2 individuals were murdered. Because they just threw dirt and rocks on them and left. And whatever they got from them, I don't know.
You know, right now these are unmarked graves in the middle of just essentially a field with no idea who it was. You could identify them due to the DNA, but obviously that means retrieving some of the DNA, which is just a can of worms I don't think that I want to open. You know, I think I've been pretty good with the spirits here at Cerro Gordo. I feel that something about that might get me on the wrong side. But I'm curious what you guys think. You know, it is an option. There could be an argument that this is giving them a name, this is giving them a space, this is giving them recognition. But there's also the argument that you're disturbing the past. So I'm curious what all of you guys think, but something I've been thinking about a lot over the last few days.
Oh, you smell that salt. They recently dug this out, so now we have all this human decomposition dirt right through here. So he's just going boink, 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 boink all the way up.
Right. But after here, we kept looking, you know, because you're looking for this Chinese cemetery that we heard so much about. So we went down further to where we had found 3 different burial sites the last time they were here. And we ended up finding 15 different places that Bosco detected on human remains, individual spaces. And it's a very weird area. It's a ledge that's flattened, so it makes sense to maybe put a couple bodies. Does it make sense for a full cemetery? I don't know. But at the same time that there's 15 of them there is very telling. It also makes me wonder, were there just kind of sporadic, smaller cemeteries instead of one large one? These are things that, again, I don't know.
Let's go to work. Oh, we'll find her. That was that little tree thing.
Oh, yeah.
Tree, yeah. With the blue ones. Okay, that's another one. Come on. So when we get up here, we're into where the bone is. So that's really good. It'll get all deep up there. Come on, go through here. It looks like we got about 15, you think, in here. So this may be the cemetery for the Asian people, the Chinese people right here.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's about, probably 5 yards between each one.
Sure.
I'd like to go over to the two little pine trees, because that's got a story.
Yeah, that's a cool one. Okay.
That's got a story.
Absolutely.
Let's go find it. Something coming out from that big pine tree I told you.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming downhill. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So the story behind this site, we've been here before, is these trees are like 3 in a row, and it's just like someone put them there for someone special. It really seems that way. In a perfect line, got a nice place behind the tree and everything. So obviously we don't know who that is, but that was a good alert.
Yeah.
It does roll downhill and everything, so I had to get out of the big pine tree up there, the second one.
Yeah.
There's a body up there. As you can see where it drained down and come down here,
Right.
and then through here, and then it's pretty clear
Yeah.
that he caught it there. So there's more than one event taking place, which is not uncommon.
Right.
Paul and Bosco do plan on coming back up here again. We want to do a couple more explorations around the buildings and continue looking on this backside of the property to see what we could find. But let me know. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about the kind of contrast of giving these people a specific name or just giving them their space.